Good morning and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Thursday, July 20, 2023. And I'd like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have in front of us an agenda. Do we have any changes, additions, subtractions? Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved, seconded, all in favor? We have liftoff. Could I have a motion to receive all the reports and communications? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Great. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to allow Director Toth to attend the meeting and participate in the discussions.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded. All in favor? Okay. Welcome, Director Toth. So, the very first item on our agenda is the Tiny Homes presentation, and I see that Sunshine Coast Tiny Homes is here with us. So, good morning, Pam Robertson. How are you? And welcome.
Good morning, Donna. Thank you for having me. I guess it's my turn to bring forward my delegation. So for those that don't know me, my name is Pam Robertson. I am the owner of Sunshine Tiny Homes here located on the Sunshine Coast. I'm also acting board member for almost 6 years now on the Tiny Home Alliance of Canada. So I do advocacy work in regards to the tiny home movement. Also a member of the Sunshine Coast for almost 50 years. So this is my home. And
Pam, you've just gone mute.
That's weird. Sorry about that. A pilot project that was brought forward to the regional district by myself and the Alliance 5 years ago, prior even to starting my company here on the Sunshine Coast. And also just going to pull up the presentation. 1 second. And I think I'll leave it in this form. Forgive me for a second. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring forward a pilot project that was presented several years back, a few times in front of previous elected officials. And just to let you know sort of where the pilot project got to was through some of the avenues of getting through the board and getting to staff. There was a recommendation made that was outlined on the pilot project. But give you an idea of what the pilot project was all about, was allowing for a temporary use permit, having property owners the ability to ease of access for a temporary secondary dwelling subject to land use policies. So primarily land that's zoned for an auxiliary dwelling unit was generally the focus. Incentivizing smart growth oriented infill building in rural areas, and a project to run for a minimum of 3 years, allowing substantial time for assessments to determine success or setbacks, and most importantly, provided immediate affordable housing solutions. So I know that probably everybody's aware of people living in their RVs and tiny homes throughout the Sunshine Coast. What we were looking for was a temporary use permit to allow the legal aspect of that to continue and for people to live peace of mind. So the benefits of the project, it's an easy installation with recreational vehicles, tiny houses, park models, micro homes or shipping containers to be used as secondary dwellings. So it was encompassed by movable structures was the term, or is the term. Protect the community from illegal dwellings that are improperly constructed and that are disconnected from amenities like the school bus in Roberts Creek or Wilson Creek, outbuildings with no amenities. There was talk of people living in boats on stilts on land and getting charged $1,000 a month for rent. So it kind of negates some of that happenings, Vancouver News, so increasing numbers of people living in vehicles and squatters, etc. Gives a proactive support to members of the community who are challenged in this time with economic difficulties, especially those who are looking to leave the Sunshine Coast to find more affordable housing, like majority of our service workers, and gives minimum intrusion on land and resources using existing RVs, tiny homes, and pre-built small outbuildings. Advantages to the SCRD, so minimizes strain on our water constraints, as these units are traditionally low water use for regards like hot water on demand, low flow, or composting toilets, etc. Densification of existing land parcels, which have more than enough space to house these homes and are already zoned for land uses. No additional and lengthy administration is needed. Fees to the contribution of the program itself, so self-generating to minimize expense to the SCRD. So $1,200 to $1,500 per unit for the entire program per home. There's another fee base that I'll get to later in the slideshow. So the SCRD recognized for its contribution to the betterment of the community, addressing the need for immediate and affordable housing. So some of the aspects to recreational vehicles are they're easily connected to existing septic and power if those things are equipped to deal with additional, say, bedroom per se. Another option could be a holding tank approved on an individual basis by the Vancouver Coastal Health. It was outlined in a supporting letter that was given to us by Vancouver Coastal Health back in 2018. And foundationals, no foundation needed, minimum intrusion to land, setbacks, etc. And the tiny house RV, so there could be controls or qualifications to ensure it meets existing density setbacks and offer other official community plan or bylaw regulations. They can be regulated so that they're built to specific CSA Z240, RV14 or 241 park model, aesthetically pleasing and can be cohesive to neighborhood or in the home, diversity in housing options. So instead of more complexes, duplexes, or apartment buildings, integration versus segregation. So there's a lot of sort of RV parks and whatnot formulating. I think that's fantastic, but that's not necessarily people's choice way of living. And right, if we act now, this temporary use process poses as an immediate option towards affordable housing solutions, safety net for displaced people, preventing homelessness, prevent our seniors, and participate in the age-friendly communities initiative sponsored by the government, act as part of the regional growth strategy, managing sustainable growth to our community, and protect our young families who are moving off the coast to find more affordable housing. References to other tiny homes in this package. So City of San, I know this is American-based, but there are examples of ways of, governments participating with the movable tiny home ADUs ordinances. The City of Grand Forks, more local to BC, they have on page 15 a tiny house on wheels bylaw that they've implemented, and it's been there for several years. Tiny homes is an alternate to community or to conventional housing. So BC Housing put out a report in 2021, just talking about all the parameters of that. And the tiny homes brochure for Fresno, California. So it actually outlines the acceptance of tiny homes and RVs as allowable ADUs, and it has a good structured insight and application and controls around what is and what isn't and what can be done on people's property. So aesthetics, parking, it has outline of where to place and situate it on the house in the backyard, so it's not in somebody's front yard being an eyesore. And so that's the end of my presentation. I thought I'd probably go through a few of the, how much time do I have left?
I'm sorry, I wasn't watching, bad me, but
That's okay.
About a couple of minutes.
Okay, so this is the Fresno brochure that they have, and it just is talking about the tiny homes, how you could have one on the property. So it's a structure intended for separate independent living quarters. They've recognized as Department of Motor Vehicles with ANSI requirements, which are different, but CSA would be the equivalency here in Canada. talks about what is the tiny home and what the definition of it thereof is. And then they call it a backyard cottage, which I believe would be similarly to ADUs, the term used in the regional district. So they just have a lot of outlines, what would be described as the qualifications, so pre-qualifications. And then they have conformity. So they, want to have these criteria requirements need to be met in order for it to move forward. They talk about concrete pads. I think we could probably even minimize that to, specifically graded and foundational requirements with hold downs and cribbing, things like that. And then architectural compatibility. And then it goes on to planning review fee. So there's actually an application review fee, and then there's the covenant fee, which would be your temporary use fee. So there's parameters that the homeowners would need to go through in order to get this through the curriculum. And then, of course, I just have reference to, it was Chris Morse at the time. He was in support through the Vancouver Coastal Health. I've not contacted them prior to this. Unfortunately, I didn't get that accomplished, but here just in good standing talks about different ways that we can have them connected or have a substitute temporary ball or something to be put in that could be extracted as well as an alternative option to putting in a full septic field. One last note that I'd like to bring forward is at the UBCM in 2022 that the Sunshine Coast Regional District put forth the standardized health and safety rules and regulations to facilitate year-round housing in RVs. That went to the resolution. I believe it was endorsed, but it has no recommendation at this time. Just thought I'd bring that forward. And then tiny homes was brought forward by Oliver in 2020, just talking about the UBCM and where we could go directionally with legalizing tiny homes on wheels. I'm also going to be attending the UBCM. My company and the Alliance will be there. We have a booth at the showcase through BC Wood, and bringing in some new information about tiny homes and how we can bring them in on a legal basis through the manufactured home building, which is what my company is putting through, has put through successfully the criteria and is putting through. But majorly the concern for through the Alliance and my company is all of the homes that are situated as of now and that have been built in the last 5 to 8 years that qualify through the RV standards, what we can do to support those inhabitants. So I just really want to thank you for your time today listening to this. I just really feel like it could be a part of the solution. The temporary use and the pilot project could be something that would revolutionize the way that British Columbians, the way that Sunshine Coast views tiny homes, RVs, and those people who are displaced in our community in the immediate season and have been for over 5 years. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And if you can stop your screen share, we can get back to the regular meeting.
Yes.
I just have a quick question for you and a quick question for staff. As part of the Alliance, I believe that you folks were advocating for changes to the Canadian Building Code that are part of the problem with this. How are advocacy efforts going at the federal level?
So right now, my cohort and I, Adrienne Fredrigo, she's the president, acting president, and also a council member in Naramata, Penticton region. And her and I have been in lengthy conversations with people through the CSA, through connected with a woman named Adair, I believe her last name's Claire, she's a retired code council member. So she actually is a consultant now. So we're working with her to submit some requests for changes through the National Building Code. And so we're kind of going to be working on those in the fall. We've just been spending lengthy times in meetings, connecting directly with people and understanding how it all kind of works and is laid out, and going back and forth between the provincial, the federal, and municipal levels, trying to get the in. So I feel like the UBCM and speaking with ministers and, kind of having those conversations is going to be instrumental in getting through the door on those. Yeah, so we're working hard, and come the fall after the busy summer season, we tend to hit the ground running. So lots of progress.
Thank you very much. And the question for staff, I remember Yuli's report coming here. I wasn't on the board at the time, but I was attending the meetings. And if staff could just give us a pretty quick thumbnail of what happened to this proposed project?
Yes, Chair. So this, the project following the board's directive was referred to and discussed by advisory planning commissions in September of 2018, and it seems through to January of 2019. And those minutes were reported on board committee agendas. There's no final report nor further board directive specific to the pilot project after September 2018. Staff do recall that there were discussions with the then new board about the priority, reach, and efficiency of zoning bylaw updates to remove housing barriers, some of which made their way into zoning bylaw 722. And this may have occurred when reviewing the APC minutes, but as I said, it didn't result in a directive. So the directive that is referenced here, 264-18, remains live, I suppose. And of course, there has been other work done around housing needs assessment, housing action plan, and as the delegation noted, advocacy to the province on clarity around RVs as homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just reminding the board, we don't make motions based on delegations, but we may want to follow up at a future meeting. Director Bax.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the delegate for bringing this forward. I was wondering how much of this work has been shared with the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Association and our own personal housing czar, Kelly Foley, and whether or not this is an initiative that they can give us any input on. Is that possible?
Who is that question for?
Yeah.
I
Pam?
put it to the chair.
Oh, to the
Or
chair.
if you can, if staff can answer this question, then or maybe Ms. Robinson can answer the question whether or not she's been in contact with the Affordable Housing Society I like to see people get out of their silos. I like to see people work together. This is a major issue here on the Sunshine Coast and all over the place, and I'd like to see if there's steps being taken for people to collaborate. And if anybody can answer that question, I'd love to hear an answer.
All right, over to Ms. Robertson.
Yeah, so I'm in communication with Kim Darwin and Karen Foley. We've been working alongside. We haven't really discussed this initiative primarily, but a lot of other initiatives and how and supportive roles. And Karen has, done interviews, and we've participated in some of the platforms that they've rolled out as far as their initiatives as well, and attended many meetings and brought tiny homes forward. So Kelly, or Chair, yes, to answer the question, there has been definitely some communication, formally no, informally absolutely, for many, many years. Yeah.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. This is very exciting. And I would like to know, how is this cap of 20 permits per electoral area determined?
Would staff like to take a crack at that one?
Thanks for the question, Chair. Scale of deployment was a consideration when this was proposed in 2018. I don't recall if there was a rationale for that particular number, just like whether 20 versus 25, but the concept was scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, and, oh, wait, Director Gabigas.
Thank you, Chair, and a question to you, a question on our process. So since this recommendation is still live, will it require a motion in the future? Or is it a simpler matter than that?
I think an appropriate move might be to ask for the question of tiny homes to be brought back to a future Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. And then we can take a bit of a deeper dive into it. It's more complicated than it looks, but it's significant. And especially if there is some hope of changing regulatory framework on the provincial and/or federal horizon, then I think we could really seriously look at it, because at that rate, temporary use permits could be a bridging mechanism to get from where we are right now to new regulations. So, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. And I know that I don't get to, vote on this, so I appreciate being here to have a say into this matter. The Grand Forks was one of the communities that was referenced in the presentation, and I know that in speaking to their planning staff, the work that they've done already was actually just a very first step. They had every intention of going further with it, but the flood happened. That was all pre-2018, and then the flood happened, and they've never gotten back to it. So, when we look at other communities that are doing things, like the Grand Forks example, there are some projects in Grand Forks that have taken advantage of the regulations that have come in, but for them it was just a start. They had every intention of doing a lot more with it and just haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you very much. Director Bax.
Yeah, there was mention that this was put to our APCs at one point, and I was wondering if it would be germane for us to put it back into the hands of the new APCs, something for them to ruminate over.
Personally, I would rather see this come back to EAS first, so that we can dig in a little bit, just to make sure that we're all clear on, as usual, the differences between municipalities and regional districts, but also anything that has changed since the original report in 2018. And of course, we've had a bylaw update, right? Bylaw 722. So, I think we need to take a fresh look before we bring it to our APCs. I'm wondering if I could see a motion to bring this report back to EAS. Director Lee.
Yes, I would be happy to make a motion because I'd like to see this come back, but I was wondering the context of it coming back. Would we be looking for a report to accompany it as an agenda item, or do we need a motion to bring it back as an agenda item, or just how would we go about that? I'd be interested in a recommendation from staff, perhaps, as they get to do all the work, like usual.
And so my question for staff is, has enough changed between 2018 and now that a new report would be merited, or could we bring the old one back for discussion? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Chair. At a minimum, staff would recommend, my professional recommendation would be that at least some sort of covering analysis of the nature of the change in the last about 5 years be included with the prior report if it was to be brought back. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee?
So I'd like to make a motion that we bring back the tiny homes back to the next EAS with a covering note over the old report that discusses changes possible.
And just over to staff, is the next EAS a reasonable timeline, or would you like a little more wiggle room?
Thank you, Chair. Staff are here to serve. The next EAS is actually October, based on September UBCM timing. And so staff would work the scope of the report to the time that the committee desires to have the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do I see a seconder for that motion? I see a seconder. Great. Is there any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Director Bax?
Yeah, one thing that I would be interested in seeing or hearing from, or somebody explaining to me is, what's the end goal here? I guess it's temporary use permits, and what's the roadmap to get to it? And so what are the steps that we need to take as a board in order to achieve this goal in plain English? If that could be included in our report in October.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. Have a nice flight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. All right, take care.
Okay, next up, we have Angela Letman representing Omicron, AEC, and Very Coast Planning and Design for the Cowley Point development. Over to you.
There, got it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to give a short presentation and be able to answer any questions. Pablo Yuste, the applicant and architect, were supposed to join us today, but he unfortunately is ill and has laryngitis. So he may be in the audience watching, but you're kind of stuck with me today. So I'm going to just do full screen if I can get there. Okay. Oh, don't want to do that. All right, we'll just go from here then. Okay, so Cowley Point variance permit application. I'm here on behalf of TELUS, the owner of the property, and Omicron, who are the architects and engineers on the property. We acknowledge that we and the proposal site at Cowley Point are situated on the traditional lands of the Shashal Nation. And you can see on the map that it is located here, approximately 12 kilometers north of Sechelt. Several consultants worked on the application and the overall rezoning as well, that you hopefully will be seeing later this year or early next year. We have architecture, structural, environmental, geotechnical, archaeology, survey and construction, and myself, Angela Letman. Prior to the TELUS purchase in approximately 2020, the property was used as waterfront glamping. And I just want to point out that we've got, where is that? Okay. We have several slides here courtesy of Expedia because they were doing the advertisement. So you can see the large decks. You can see the tents on platforms and decks, the tent interiors, yurt interiors, the type of platform decks that are there and were there at that time. And we are unsure about how long the glamping resort was operating. There were also connecting boardwalks to each of the cabins, to the tent platforms and yurts. So at the time of TELUS purchase in 2020, they had a survey completed and it identified 12 large tent yurt platforms and in terms of the decks as well as the boardwalks. And you can see that there. It did not identify the location of those relative to the waterfront, but we have later determined that. So between 2020 and 2022, TELUS replaced the tents with cabins on the existing deck platforms. Omicron, the architects, and myself began work on the rezoning application in June 2022. So in the fall of 2022, a second survey was completed, and that identified the location and the height of the deck platforms and cabins in relation to the natural boundary of the ocean. And it should be noted a little bit that the previous zoning bylaw 320 had the setback from the natural boundary was 7.5 meters, and that in October of the bylaw 722 was adopted, and the minimum setback was 15 meters. So it made the existing locations in relative to the zoning bylaw even worse. In terms of the site plan, this shows the location of the accessory cabins. And you can see that there's also the 7.5 and the 15-meter lines. You can see the green line and the red line along the waterfront, and the location of the cabins and the platforms. In terms of the rationale, why are we applying for the variances instead of moving the cabins? It's because to do so would be a detriment further to the environment. It would mean cutting more trees in this mature second growth, and more impact on the understory and habitat. A Diamond Head environmental report that you have a copy of in your agenda concurs as well, and they're also recommending the areas here where I've tipped the photo so that it's exactly like the site plan, if you can see that, just for ease of looking at it. These tents will be removed and the area remediated, as well as the cabin in this area and also towards the entrance. So the total areas that we'll be looking at restoration would be about half an acre, 2,000 square meters. In terms of the next steps through the DVP process, there would be the board review, obviously, whatever motion gets made today. Further archaeological work, the building permits, they have been applied for, so the technical drawings have been created. There's a number of foundation and structural improvements that need to be made for the cabins to meet the building codes as accessory buildings. The removal of the cabins and platforms at number 6 and 13, and the tents at 3, 4, and 5. Establishment of a natural landscape restoration plan for the 3 areas by a landscape architect and Diamond Head Environment, with the review by the Shishal Nation and the SCRD, and the implementation of that landscape restoration plan and ongoing monitoring. Are there any questions?
Thank you. And if you stop screen sharing, then we can get everybody up on our Hollywood squares. I have an initial question, which is that, and you may not have the answer to this, but tell us, had the environmental report done in 2020. And the environmental report even notes that DFO recommends a 30-meter setback from the water, but they went ahead and built 13 cabins and yurt sites, and I'm just wondering how that happened.
The platforms were already there. The environmental report doesn't mention that, the original one, but those platforms were all there, as were the boardwalks. They were there at the time of purchase. So we went back to Diamond Head and asked them to now address, so they did come in previously to that, and then the cabins were constructed, and Diamond Head was asked to look at them again, and they concurred with the rationale that if we were to remove the platforms and the cabins and put them back the 15 meters, then it would be more detriment to the site.
Right, constructed without building permits. Director Stamford.
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm just asking for clarification here, that the recommendation is that Diamond Head implies that if those cabins and platforms were removed and then put somewhere else, that is where the extra environmental degradation comes in. Would it be less degradation if they were simply removed, period?
We would, if they were removed, period, we would most likely apply for building permits for the accessory buildings to be constructed elsewhere on the site, and most likely in that waterfront forested area.
Okay, Director Bax?
Yeah, one of the things that kind of, I don't see why there was building going on without building permits. That seems to be a bit of a sticking point. I know that there's a lot of controversy in this site. I know that there's a lot of worry that people are going to be, the increased traffic is going to affect the area. I think that TELUS should be a leader in doing these things right, and having built without a building permit in an area that was known to be supposedly in a setback, it just doesn't sit with me very well.
Thank you. I don't think that was a question. Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair. I have one question for the presenter and one for staff. First, thank you so much for the presentation. Would we be able to get a copy of those slides that you just showed us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And a question to staff, if that's okay?
Well, we're about to get a staff report
Oh, well then.
on this, so perhaps we can hold the questions for staff, but are there any further questions for the presenter? I am not seeing any, so thank you very much, Ms. Letman.
Thank you.
All right, in that case, that takes us to item 4, which is the DVP application for Cowley Point Cabins, and over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. This variance application seeks relief from a zoning bylaw setback requirement for 5 existing cabins, 1 yurt, and boardwalks on the property. These structures are built without permits and within the 15-meter setback from the natural boundary of the ocean. These structures are intended to be part of a proposed future youth camp on the property for which a rezoning application would be forthcoming. Before the future development is approved, the existing cabins and yurts will only be used for non-residential or accessory uses, and as such, they contain no sleeping accommodations or cooking or plumbing facilities. The development variance permit would allow the structures in question to remain in place on the subject property and bring them into compliance with BC Building Code through application of building permits. Analysis of this report indicates that this is a reasonable solution to resolve the non-compliance issue of these structures and facilitate their intended use in the future. The applicant has consulted with Shishal Nation on this DVP, and feedback received is reflected in the recommendations of this report. Staff recommend issuing the development variance permit as noted in the recommendation, subject to implementation of an environmental restoration plan. And additionally, since the publication of this report, staff have received comments from 5 additional residents expressing concern or objection for the approval of this DVP. Generally, the reasons for opposition from these 5 residents relate to concern over environmental impacts and precedent of supporting variances resulting from a property owner choosing to build first and then ask for forgiveness. Thank you. Staff are here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I have one question, which is the performance bond. How are the amounts set for performance bonds?
Thank you, and good question. Certainly a piece that staff will be looking at as part of our PEP 2 project. Something we're behind on with other local governments is that we do not actually have a delegation authority to staff to take securities in many cases, nor do we have policies that even in cases when a development variance permit is issued by the board that actually stipulate how we calculate that particular fee. The one closest thing that we do have is contained in the agricultural development permit areas that are a buffer area, and we have a 50% cost of the construction of the works. And so that's the closest comparison that we have. So staff have worked to come up with what was felt as a reasonable estimate, not knowing what the cost of the works are at this time. But certainly if there's a wish to relook at that, that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around building this many structures without a building permit. I'm used to seeing someone build something on their property, a shed or something, without a building permit, but we're talking a large number of structures. I was wondering if staff had any insight into how something like this could happen, or was there any explanation given prior to you creating this report recommending that we, oops, sorry,
I believe we have a request for a short recess.
yes.
All right, 5 minutes, folks. We will be back at 10:16. Thank you. Thank you. And now we're back and not 30 seconds early. And I'm going to go over to Director Lee, who had just asked a question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll withdraw that question. I'll hold it for later when this gets further along. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. As the inlet is quite remote and hard for staff to keep an eye on and monitor, how was this issue brought up to staff?
Okay, my fault here is that before doing this, I should have gone to the script. So I apologize. I am not in practice for doing development variance permit applications. So we'll get back to you, Director Gabias. Having heard staff's introduction to the proposed development variance permit, if there is anyone in the webinar audience or in the boardroom wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand. If attending virtually, please use the raise hand tool or *6. And I or someone will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, please give your full name and, if you wish, your address for the record. In order to keep our meeting moving, we ask that you please keep your comments focused and limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards a recommendation to the board. So I see someone with your hand up, so please step forward to the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name's John Carsley, and I live in Tuwanik. And I was one of the letter senders, I guess, about this application. And my point is short and very straightforward. Why should a big corporation with lots of resources and consultants be allowed to do something that the ordinary citizen in the Sunshine Coast is not allowed to do? And that is build without permits and then request permission to keep structures that are not only within the 15-meter setback, but virtually all of them are within the 7-meter setback, which has been much more long-standing. So the question of Director Lee, how did this happen without anybody noticing? Because everybody on the inlet noticed, anybody with a boat that passed up there noticed it. And I think that unfortunately TELUS, which has done so much good for this community, is taking a leaf out of their CEO, who has done exactly the same thing with his properties on Tilikum Bay to an egregious extent, and when asked not to do it, said, "Sue me." So we can't have that happen again. We have no guarantee that TELUS will keep its word. The environmental restoration has nothing to do with where the cabins are. It is an already bare space and was probably already planned, I don't know, before, but big deal. Those cabins really are the thin edge of a wedge, and I expect that it will be the first of a number of things that will come up in the proposal, which we have not even seen. I think, take your courage and stick it to the sticking place, whatever that quote is that I just got wrong, but I don't think we can let this precedent happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just 1 second. And Director Gabius.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I would like to refer this to the Half Moon Bay APC.
That is a motion. Do we have a seconder? Motion to refer is seconded. It's on the floor. So what? Oh, you would like to speak. All right. Director Lee.
I do support Director Gabius's motion, but I also would like to see it referred to the District of Sechelt, and also the Area A APC. Can I add that to your motion? It's not on the floor, so.
I'm okay with that.
All right. I'm told there is no such thing as a friendly amendment, but we're all friendly here, so I think we can make that a motion. Is there a seconder to this broadened motion? Let's get the motion on the floor, folks. Kate just seconded. Thank you very much. Now, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have further discussion?
Are we going to be consulting with the Seashell Nation?
I believe this is already under discussion with the Seashell Nation. I don't think we have to. Okay, and my fault, I missed a couple of hands in the audience, so here I am doing a bad job again. Just, sue me. Okay, so yes, I know. So, whoever has decided that they are next, would you please come up to the mic and state your name? Thank you very much.
Hi, Kim Doherty, Half Moon Bay. Thank you, Half Moon Bay resident and APC member, and thank you for taking my question. My question is, how did a variance permit request of this significance, multiple buildings in violation of tree cutting and flooding bylaws, not be referred to the APCs in the first place? Like, what makes the decision about what goes to an APC and what doesn't? Because it seems pretty significant to have not gone to an APC to me.
Thank you. I'm going to endeavor on that one. We have changed the process so that development variant permits do not automatically go to APCs because a lot of them are very minor in nature and are not needed to go to the APC. But this is the correct process now. It's come to the board and it is being referred to the APC. And over to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to remind the committee that there is a motion on the floor to refer that is still live.
There is. Procedurally, would you prefer that the thing is that we really should let people speak before we vote on our motion. And so I may have been remiss in allowing the motion to get on the floor, but I really do feel that the public wishes to speak, and we said they could speak first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can temporarily lay it on the table, deal with your business, just to remind you to come back to it, that it is still on the floor.
Thank you. We will be back. And if that is your question, is there any?
So are you saying that this is a minor variance and that's why it didn't go to the APCs?
No. We no longer automatically send variance permits to the APC. It comes first to Electoral Area Services, and then if we deem it significant, then we refer it to the APC. Thank you. Yes, there are two more people with hands up. Can we table the motion? Okay, motion to table. Does that need a seconder? I don't think it does. All right, it is tabled. And who is next? Thank you. Come on up to the mic.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My name is Shannon Rohde, and I lived in both the Half Moon Bay area, and now I live in the Seashell area. My question is there other unpermitted development currently happening on this property that can be revealed to us, since this other unpermitted development was not told to us? Is there road building happening on this property? And is there a way for us to know what is happening now that they've set the precedent of not being forthcoming with the information? Perhaps there should be a way for us to be on top of whether they are following the regulations or not. I don't know if that's something that is permissible. And the second thing I want to say is that there's no DPAs designated, as it says in the report, but that's because it hasn't been assessed for DPAs, not because there aren't any in that area. And perhaps that is something that also needs to be addressed, if possible, before any more development is made in that area whatsoever.
Thank you. We don't usually answer questions on the fly. You're raising good questions. I'm wondering what is the best way to address questions without, at some future point, what would be, or should this go to the APC for discussion, like what is our best next move here?
Thank you for the question, Chair. From a process point of view, staff of course are listening. Staff hear the speaker raise concerns about unpermitted development and about communication. And so the process of hearing whether interests are impacted as part of hearing from affected parties appears to be working. And as the committee moves on to consider the staff report, if there are questions for staff, they can be directed to staff at that time. Whether that's today or following APC referral
Yeah, I think
as needed. Thank you.
following APC referral would be the correct way to do this. The process we're following right now allows for comments from affected parties, but it doesn't really address questions. It's not a question and answer period, but it's it's something to flag to the attention of the board and to the APC when it goes there. So I'm going to leave that for right now, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
And former Director Rudland.
Elise Rudland, sorry, and I live in Half Moon Bay, and I was involved in the past in oyster farming in the inlet, and we did have a lease on Narrows Inlet and Storms Bay, so I have a history of the area. But for today, I also sat on our revised APC when I tried to get the whole of the inlet part of the Half Moon Bay APC. It was just too problematic for staff and planning and the community, who really do not, most of the people in Half Moon Bay probably have never been up the inlet. So there was no interest at the committee level to undertake that. And that is why you do not have development permit areas, because it wasn't BSS. So I think that was a failure of our APC, or official community plan, I should say. And that sort of is the answer. But what my recommendation is, I've been talking, we had the Half Moon Bay Fair, talked to people from West Seychelles, and so I asked them about some things. I think the West Seychelles Community Association and the Tuwanik Community Association are the people who really know the inlet. And so I think they need to be brought into discussions on the future of the inlet.
Thank you very much. And if we refer this to the District of Seychelles, they then could refer it on to community associations, because they do that from time to time. Do we have any further speakers? All right. We have one online. Lovely. All right. Teresa, could you, whoops, I think I did. Oh, good. You are unmuted, and please go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Teresa Logan. I live in Tewanik. One question or concern I have where it was mentioned that the nation has been consulted. I think that was the previous chief. So I think it is extremely important for everybody to go back to the nation with the new chief and talk about this project, because I don't think they've been approached by Omicron, or I'm guessing maybe SCRD staff. But I think since there's a new chief, it would be most appropriate to speak with Lenora.
Thank you very much, Ms. Logan. And I see that Ms. Letman would like to respond, so I will just allow you to respond. Thank you.
Quickly, Chair and committee members, no, TELUS has been in consultation with the First Nations, Seychelles Nation. They have been sent the PowerPoint presentation even just a couple of days And they have, I'm sure they're in the audience watching, and we have a memorandum of understanding with them. They have been consulted, and it was, I believe, signed with the new chief and council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, one more. You've already spoken once. If you can keep it brief, thank you.
I am sorry, but it's just a follow-up of that question that the First Nations were consulted. I'd like to know what they decided about this issue, and if that's in the memorandum of understanding, I'd like to know a bit about that.
So thank you, and that's outside of our purview at the moment because I am not going to speak on behalf of the nation. This is not a question and answer. I'm sorry. We've got to get back on our proper meeting agenda, and I apologize. I should have been slightly more prepared for this eventuality. But we did table a motion, and I don't know what the official way to resurrect a motion is. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. You may remove that motion from the table by just reiterating the motion and bringing it back on the floor. Move that it be brought back on the floor for consideration.
Thank you, and I see Director Lee.
I'd like to move that we bring back the original motion to the table for further discussion.
Thank you very much. And perhaps the recording secretary could remind us what the original motion was. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And that the staff report titled Department Variance Permit DVP 00085 Cowley Point Cabins be referred to the Half Moon Bay Electoral Area B Advisory Planning Committee, the Egmont Pender Harbor Electoral Area A APC, and District of Sechelt Council.
Thank you very much. I think that's very straightforward, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we are going to move on. I'm actually going to suggest that we take a 5-minute break before we move on to the rest of our agenda. So we will return at 10:38. Thank you. Okay, and back we are once again to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Thursday, July the 20th, 2023. The next item on our agenda is zoning amendment bylaw 722.2, consideration of first, second, and third readings of 562 Veterans Road, a property that is becoming very familiar because I think it's been here 3 or 4 times before. So over to staff.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This zoning amendment application seeks to change the subdivision district of the subject property to allow for a 2-lot subdivision. This bylaw previously received 3 readings under zoning bylaw 310. A covenant registration was required to ensure future trail access prior to adoption, and that covenant has now been registered on title. As zoning bylaw 722 is now in effect, the bylaw will need to be reread under zoning bylaw 722. As a Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure approval is required after third reading, the bylaw cannot receive all 4 readings at once. Staff recommend that the bylaw receive first 3 readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, believe it or not, this is a fairly straightforward subdivision. So, would somebody like to move, and I believe we can, move first, second, and third reading of bylaw number 722.2. We're doing, yeah, is this not going to board? Over to staff, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The committee is actually making a recommendation to forward the bylaw to the board for readings.
Thank you for that save again. So, are there any questions or comments before we make a motion on the recommendations? I see Director Lee's hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 44, please.
And that is seconded. Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands, all in favor? That passes. Thank you. And that will go to next week's board meeting. So, next item up is zoning amendment bylaw number 722.6. Of course, it's a new zoning bylaw. That's why the numbers aren't longer. I'm getting this. 268 Stella Maris Road. Over to staff, please.
The SRD has received a zoning bylaw amendment application to amend the zoning and subdivision district of 268 Stella Maris Road in Area F, West Howe Sound. The proposal is to amend the zoning from residential rural 1, RU1, to residential 2, R2, and the subdivision district from I to C to enable subdivision and future residential development. This proposal is consistent with the West Howe Sound Official Community Plan's residential land use designation in which the subject parcel is located. Overall, to implement this proposal requires 3 planning applications, each with distinct approval processes: zoning amendment, subdivision, and development permit. The process to consider this proposal begins with the current application to change the zoning from RU1 to RU2 and the subdivision district from I, which has a minimum parcel size of 4 hectares, to C, which has a minimum parcel size of 0.2 hectares. This application has undergone preliminary public consultation. A public information meeting was conducted in accordance to the Local Government Act, and the application was referred to the APC for comment. Staff recommend that the zoning bylaw amendment 722.6 proceed to first and second readings and a public hearing be arranged. Staff are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Director Stamford?
Thank you, Chair. Reading through the report, thank you. It's very informative. I will be moving the recommendations, but I have a question. The Advisory Planning Committee for Area F had a number of recommendations, and questions. I'm just wondering when they will be at least looked at, if not addressed, at what point in the process?
Thank you very much, and over to a volunteer from staff.
Thank you for the question. Several of the comments had to do with the development permit areas, which are being assessed at the moment. And we will answer the questions more directly following the public hearing and before the upcoming readings, third reading.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, I have a question about the policy 7.3.4 part 2 on the bottom of page 52. It's got to do with the community amenity contribution, and so this is something new for us. We're going to be getting a new consultation, a person to consult about these amenities, and it'd be interesting to see how that's all going to work and how often do we get these amenities. I know that's a slew of questions.
A slew of questions for staff.
Good ones, and sorry. Thank you for the questions and some good ones, and I'll try and summarize as best as I can. Community amenity contributions are something that have been ability of local governments for some time in the Local Government Act, without offhand about 10 years. They're used quite widespread throughout the province and elsewhere on the coast. These particular policies were brought into all of our, well, 6 of our 7 OCPs back in 2018. And since that time, the way that they're actually worded in here, to my knowledge, no application has actually triggered a community amenity contribution as being mandatory as part of the rezoning. We have had some voluntary ones as part of official community plan amendments. Those, to my knowledge, have not gone forward, though, at this time. But there was one a while ago, actually back in 2017, I stand corrected, sorry, where we did receive some money for towards agriculture as part of one. That being said, it is hoped that through this community amenity contribution that's proposed as part of this application, we currently don't have a mechanism to actually calculate community amenity contributions. So there's a policy saying we should get these, but no actual policy or procedure as to how to actually take them. So it's hoped that through this application, the money can be used to hire a consultant to further investigate a policy on actually taking these community amenity contributions and solidifying something that's fair and consistent across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just have a follow-up question. Does the structure of the regional districts in terms of our services make community amenity contributions more challenging than they would be for a municipality which can move money around from service to service?
Thank you for the question. Good one. In terms of the moving of the money around, that would be a better question for our CFO than a planner. That being said, I can just say that regional districts do have the authority to take community amenity contributions, and they can be used to fund a host of various community amenities, anything from parks to affordable housing projects, trail systems, this sorts of stuff, community centers. So there's a wide variety of uses that they can be applied to, and that's why we've seen them so readily used throughout BC. Thank you.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment that, in the District of Seashell, we split our CACs 50-50 between affordable housing reserve and then the community amenity contributions. We don't really spend them yet, but we are at least collecting them. A question that I've got for staff, I'm willing to put my name forward to chair the public hearing, because I know that that's sort of practice that a director other than the area director chair the public hearing. But my question is it intended that the public hearing be in person, hybrid, or virtual? And if it's going to be in person or hybrid, is it going to be here or down at Eric Cardinal Hall? Thank you.
And as a matter of fact, I can answer that question because we had that discussion in agenda review. We are looking at a hybrid public hearing, and this room is set up for hybrid. whereas Eric Cardinal Hall is not. So it would be here. And so people could either attend in person or online. And I'm not seeing any further hands, but I did hear a volunteer to chair the public hearing, and it's usually usually the area director is the alternate chair. So if Director Stamford wanted to volunteer, I see your hand is up.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. I'm happy to volunteer as delegate as the alternate chair. And with that agreement, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 47.
And I see a seconder. No further hands. In that case, I call the question. All those in favor? Good, and that passes. Page 47 without further mishap. And next up, we have, yes, the Planning Enhancement Project. This is a long title. 2 Phase 1 Policy Fix Micro Project Amendment Zoning Bylaw number 722.9 and 337.123. Over to Senior Planner Julie Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Manager Jackson here. I'll start out, and Senior Planner Clark will take over after. Just want to give a little bit of context to our long-titled project that's before you here. So SCRD's commitment to revitalizing planning services has been embodied in 2 recent projects, Planning Enhancement Project 1 and 2, which are Development Approvals Process Review and OCP Renewal, and they're also known as PEP 1 and PEP 2. So without spoiling next week's Committee of the Whole's look into outcomes from PEP 1, staff can say that it has been identified that there are foundational links between these 2 projects, whereby renewing SCRD's regulatory planning framework is essential to support enhancing development approvals processes. In recent memory, there have been several developments that have raised deep concerns within our community and resulted in calls to ensure that development is done appropriately, bringing community benefits, not destruction, to sensitive landscapes. As planners, when we identify policy conflicts that are out of step with community vision and best practices, it is our job to make professional recommendations that, if followed, can help course correct and build more equitable, healthy, and resilient community. As part of PEP 2, staff are bringing forward first reading report to consider proposed amendments to Bylaw 337 and 722 that seek to provide regulatory consistency, clarity, and acceptable minimum standards for watercourse and shoreline protection. The proposed amendments are the first of a series of micro-project policy fixes to be brought forward to SCRD Board's consideration as part of OCP renewal and PEP 2. Micro-project policy fixes seek to keep the community engaged throughout PEP 2, close known policy gaps, align with provincial legislation and guidelines, and consider industry best practices. In relation to PEP 1, this approach will ensure that progress is made in striving for much-needed regulatory updates that protect our community, provide clarity, foster bylaw compliance, and reduce frictions in the development process approvals, as we keep our eye on the prize of OCP renewal. If adopted, these and other future micro-project policy fixes will be monitored, built upon, and adjusted if needed through the ongoing PEP 2 work and based on findings from PEP 1. As PEP 2 engages an equity lens to address key issues in our community, including climate, housing, culture, recreation, economy, and reconciliation, these micro-project policy fixes invoke continued community engagement as we shift the policy dial to reflect the type of community we want to see. The success of OCP renewal will be built over time and cannot be measured by a single moment in time with a brand new glossy OCP being rolled out. It is a series of steps that add up so that when we look back, we will have made a difference. Micro-project policy fixes strive to achieve this by helping us gain momentum as we journey towards full OCP renewal. Senior Planner Clark will now provide an overview of some of the key detailed projects of this particular micro-policy fix that's before you today. Thank you.
Good morning, committee. I'd first like to acknowledge and thank my colleague Alana Whitman, who's prepared a lot of the work that you're going to see this morning. The purpose of this report is to present proposed housekeeping amendments to zoning bylaw 722 and 337 in 3 focus areas. Those three areas are to update the parcel area calculation in bylaw 722 and 337, to enhance the streamside protection and enhancement area buffer in bylaw 722 and add a buffer in bylaw 337, and to enhance the setbacks from water bodies and water courses in bylaw 337. The proposed amendments provide measures to strengthen protection of ecologically sensitive areas, including water courses and shorelines within our area. Further, the proposed amendments enhance consistency between the two SCRD zoning bylaws and increase the efficiency of development
Chair, we need to
approvals.
recess the meeting. We've lost internet.
All right, folks, we are having an unexpected recess, and the fun just continues.
Further, the proposed amendments enhance consistency between SCRD zoning bylaws and and increase the efficiency of development approvals process by setting clear and consistent regulations across the regional district electoral areas. Staff recommend that SCRD zoning bylaw amendment 722.9 and 337.123 proceed to first reading, and staff are here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Director Bax.
That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Ms. Clark. I was wondering, I've had consultations with my community groups, and they were wondering if there's any way we could expand these DPAs to help protect our trees within our communities. But I digress. I would put forward that we accept the motions as they are stated on page 74.
And I see a seconder. So I just have a process question for staff, because our agendas for July APCs are already set, and August we don't meet. So I assume this will be going to APCs in September and then maybe back to us in October. Is that kind of the timeline we're looking at here?
Thank you very much for the question. We'll take the second part of that question around APCs. As this is a proposed land use change, we have proactively referred to the APCs. We do that automatically when it is an OCP amendment or a zoning bylaw amendment. And so based on scheduling, 4 of our 5 areas received this referral in July, and Roberts Creek receives it in September, with anticipated ability of staff to bring back a report if the committee chooses to move this work forward.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't see any further hands up. No further questions. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes. Well, internet permitting, we will move on to Annex F, Item 8, Proposed ALR Exclusion, 508 Pratt Road.
Thank you, Chair. The SCRD received this referral from the Agricultural Land Commission regarding an application seeking exclusion of a 9.75 acre parcel at 508 Pratt Road in Electoral Area E, Elphinstone. The applicant is seeking an exclusion from the agricultural land reserve in order to facilitate a two-phase development. The first phase would propose short-term rental of the existing home and 9 manufactured homes. The second phase would propose an eventual residential subdivision and mixed-use area. This application was previously referred to the Electoral Area Services Committee and has now been reviewed by the Elphinstone APC, who recommend that the application be denied. The applicant has informed the SCRD that they are working on a new proposal for the parcel. Should the new proposal not conform to SCRD and ALC guidelines, a new application would be required. Staff recommend that the current application be denied.
Thank you very much. I think that is perfectly straightforward. There are no members of the public in either the real or virtual gallery, so I will look for a motion. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations as listed on page 85.
And that is seconded. Seeing no further hands, all those in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. Next up, we have electoral areas granting aid debrief and policy discussion. And over to our CFO.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is in front of you as the electoral areas grant and aid process concluded in May. The grants were distributed to people and announced at the end of May and will be forwarded to recipients in August. Typically, we have what's called a debrief or a summary after the process has concluded to identify any process improvements or policy changes or procedural changes that the committee would like to undertake. So in front of you today is a very comprehensive report to give a lot of background, recognizing that some of the committee members, that was their first process for awarding grants and aid. So we wanted to give a thorough background as far as where we've come, as far as the policies and procedures. And so happy to take any feedback or comments, questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to make a couple of comments right now. I appreciate the in-depth report. I have the feeling that grant and aid hasn't been comprehensively reviewed in some time. I'm also aware that the town of Gibsons is in the middle of reviewing their grant and aid policy as we speak. And my suggestion is going to be that we refer this, rather than start doing housekeeping amendments on the fly in committee, that we refer this to a small working group of no more than 3 rural directors to sit down and go through it in detail and bring back some recommendations to the Electoral Area Services Committee. And I will be looking for volunteers. So, Director Bax.
Yeah, I'll volunteer for that task. I have concerns about some of the, what I believe is we have rules against repeated grants that, so some organizations, they depend on our grants for on an annual basis, and it's my understanding that that's not supposed to be part of is that supposed to be not within the grants and aid envelope? Over to staff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So that particular item has actually been brought forward to past boards for consideration through our auditors. So one of the audit recommendations several years back was to do an investigation as to the appropriateness for ongoing payments to community groups. And the conclusion was that when you are paying for same service over and over again, you should establish a service for that purpose from the regional, district, and legislative framework. So hence why that is reflected in your policy. We believe there might be some comments in the staff report to that effect.
And over to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to check in on process for this. And just as a reminder, we do have a board policy review committee that is delegated the task of reviewing board policy. So my recommendation would be that if this policy needs to be amended, that it be perhaps referred to a future meeting of the board policy review, which we could schedule at some time in Q4 or in September, should the board feel compelled to review it sooner rather than later. And I think typically what would happen is the debate probably should occur in an open public meeting. So the directors will have the agenda package ahead of time, so they'll have time to, caucus and think about some of those recommendations that they want to bring forward in terms of amending the policy, but we would prefer to bring those amendments forward in a convened open meeting.
Right. I'm going to go to the chair of our policy review committee, Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I think that would be a good move, is to bring this towards, bring this to the policy committee. I'm hoping that we can consider not September, because so far everything is just landing in September, and it's a very busy month. But yeah, I think we can move this forward in that direction.
Was that a motion, Director Stanford?
I move that this, the grant and aid policy considerations be sent to the SCRD policy committee at a future date.
And I see a seconder. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of process. So as I don't have the luck of being on this committee, what would be the proper avenue for other directors to give input?
Great question. I'm almost wondering whether it wouldn't be worth having something like a lunch and learn. Because grant and aid, we wrestle with it every year, and it would be an opportunity for the newer directors to ask some background questions about how we ended up where we are. And I am curious too about how other regional districts are dealing with this problem, because it can't be unique to us. It's pretty clear that grant and aid programs, they get revised on a regular basis. Seashell's been through a couple of iterations of it. And the auditor findings are not, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I can see why regional districts particularly struggle with that particular policy. So I don't know if it would be possible. Over to our CFO. Thank you.
Yeah, just noticing, or just for the committee's awareness, on page 102, the policy was actually thoroughly revised. There was actually 2 meetings held to revise the policy, and it was adopted on February 11th, 2021. The prior policy had like dozens of revisions in it, so this is the manifestation of a revised policy. So from staff's perception, it's not that it's only 2 years old since we really, or a little over 2 years that we've actually taken a review, so we can bring some of that information, which I believe part of it is included in the agenda. So a lunch and learn may be a good idea to try to give a primer as to where we've been, what we went through in the last review, and maybe some suggestions going forward. So just understanding what some of the challenges are and how we can navigate those.
Thank you very much, Director Bax.
Oh, I was going to remove my volunteering for the now defunct committee that we were going to set up. And I'd like the lunch and learn to include also how to establish a function or establish funding for these community groups as well, if that's the route that we have to take. You know, that would be an idea that I'd like to bandy around. And another question is, who is on the policy review committee? Am I? I know I am, but who else is?
Director Stanford, rescue us. I'm on it.
Okay, that's 4. Is that it? Okay, good.
That's okay. When it's called, we'll be told to turn up. So we'll be there. But I would encourage all the directors to please read this through in some detail. And I will ask CFO Perot, community schools. We don't have a service for community schools, do we? Or do we? I read through the service grid and I did not see I saw a joint use of school service, but I didn't see a community school service.
Function 125.
Okay. But it sort of goes through grant and aid, or does it go through community partners now? It used to go through grant and aid.
Goes through community partners through the budgeting process, as do other services that have regular ongoing grants contributed through an established regional district service.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
I'm just looking for clarity as to where we're sitting right now. I think we had a motion on the table, but also in addition to that, it sounds like we, in our lunch and learn, which I do hope we get going, is part of what we'd like to do is get a sense of not just grant and aid, but how the differences are between community group funding, school group funding. Like there seems to be different ways of us supporting community groups, and it's not clear why they're different.
CFO.
If those questions that certain directors have can be forwarded through to staff, we'll ensure to incorporate those because we want to make sure that we cover what questions you might have in that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Lee.
I believe that we need to deal with the motion on the floor and then discuss what will be in a lunch and learn, and if we need a motion to have one of those. So just to get the order right.
Thank you. The
So
motion,
if we're gonna ask questions, it needs to be about the motion that's on the floor here right now.
fair enough. The motion right now is to refer this to the policy committee. All in favor? Good. It goes to the policy committee. I don't believe we need a motion for a lunch and learn. We have not previously done that, so I think we can let that go, but if there are any very broad questions, not getting into the weeds, Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that I got the answer to my question earlier. So the proper channel for a director who's not on the Board Policy Review Committee to provide input would be through the Lunch and Learn? Is that correct?
Well, you can get answers to questions at the Lunch and Learn and then make suggestions to the policy committee. Suggestions for renovation of the policy. I think the policy is the classic compromise where nobody is entirely happy with it, but over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just add further to that. Should the Policy Review Committee wish to invite other directors to join in the debate similar to what we've done here today, that option is open to them. I'll also say that my understanding was that you were interested in a smaller working group. If there's a larger interest in reviewing this, we can easily refer this to any of our standing committees. It does not necessarily need to go to the Board Policy Review if there's a larger interest from the Electoral Area Services Committee, for example.
Thank you. I would just like to avoid moving commas in a fully called meeting because it's not a great use of anybody's time if we get fully into the weeds on the grant and aid. So let's start with the lunch and learn and see where we get to. If we identify a few areas where directors are not really happy or would like to see some changes, then that sets us up nicely to go into a meeting where we propose some changes. Have we beaten this to death? I think we can move on. Thank you very much, CFO. Next item up is Roberts Creek Park protection, and over to Parks.
Thank you very much. Good morning. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with options available to establish legal mechanisms to formally protect SARD's Roberts Creek Park. On May 25th, 1995, through the issuance of a letter entitled Permission to Enter and Construct, SARD granted authority to the Roberts Creek Community Association to install and maintain a sewerage or septic field within Roberts Creek Park. As per the letter, the SARD was to enter into an agreement with the Roberts Creek Community Association to grant a formal right-of-way. However, any long-term regional parkland disposition for either private or community purposes actually requires additional processes and statutory approvals that have never been formally completed. These requirements may have not been known or considered at the time of original SARD authorization and approval of the sewage disposal system on SARD parkland. Currently, without any formal agreements in place, there are risks associated with any use of SARD parkland for community septic or sewerage purposes. And in the absence of any legal agreements, there also exists a significant degree of liability concerns and exposure. To mitigate these risks and liabilities, and to provide legal clarity, as well as to establish rights, roles, and responsibilities for sewerage infrastructure within SARD's regional Roberts Creek Park, staff recommend option 2, pursue the use of a restrictive covenant on land title or other appropriate legal documentation, for example, an easement. These tools exist and can help provide both parties with legal clarity, establish a framework to inform the use of the land, and provide formal park protection. In addition, these reciprocal agreements can serve to support ongoing and responsible community association use of the park and any improvements for sewerage purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And over to Director Bax.
Yeah, I have a question for staff through the board, through the chair. There's been consultation with the community association already, has there?
Over to staff.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. Yes, there has. There's been confirmation that this is an acceptable process to follow, and we'll work together on registering the governments pending board decision, committee decision. Sorry. Thank you.
My follow-up is that I put forward the recommendations on page 117.
Do I see a seconder? I see a seconder. Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about using parks for septic fields. So my question is there any way that this field or this disposal could be put in on the property that the not-for-profit owns?
Over to staff.
Thank you, and through the chair. I think we have a part of the solution is that it already exists, and so containing and maintaining and making sure that we properly paper what the practice is the first important thing. In terms of an expansion or consideration around changes, that has regulatory requirements that would require further consideration by the SCRD, which is, I think, part of the proposal or the part of the resolution that was discussed last week with the board as well in terms of their grant application for the septic system. So planning is still underway. Part of the covenant would also, we would anticipate suggesting in the covenant that when services are available to hook up to, that be done right away, because the long-term protection of the park is absolutely paramount to us, thus the importance of moving forward with this covenant. Further exploration for expansion, et cetera, would need to be considered at that time, but we need to paper what's already practiced. Thank you.
Thank you. I was having trouble putting the two together. I understand now. Thank you.
Thank you. And just because I have a park with a sewer field under the swing sets does not mean it's a good idea. So I fully support recommendations, and we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Thank you very much. That moves us on to RFP, Engineering Services Ports Capital Projects Award, and over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. We don't have an introduction. I think the report is fairly straightforward, but we are happy to answer questions if there are some. Thank you.
It does indeed look fairly straightforward. She said, looking hopefully around. Director Stamford.
This was just a general question, Chair, as a newish member of the board. How often does this particular service award come back for requiring more money? How often does it fit within budget? I know we've got an overage, or we've included an overage here, but is it enough? Do we expect to be seeing a budget increase in the near future?
Predict the future, please, staff.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe there's two parts to that question. So the first, what is in front of you today is engineering to get the designed detail done. So we have built in a contingency, and we do so in the hopes that it's enough to cover the cost of what is in front of you today. I think the second part of that question is, what about the actual construction of? And that is why we need to go and get the detailed design done, so that we are cognizant of what updated costs might be. And we don't know where that will lead us. It may require a budget lift, but that would have to wait for our budgeting process and the detailed design to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. She says, looking hopefully around for a motion. I see a motion coming from Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move the recommendations listed on page 123.
And I see a seconder. Thank you. Seeing no further hands, all those in favor? That passes with the 4 of us who are in the ports function. Next up is the Area E APC minutes. The only recommendation in those is the one that we already passed, which was the denial of the ALC application, although I just wanted to say thank you to my outstanding APC for an excellent meeting last month, and I'm privileged to have such a great APC. POMO committee meeting minutes, do we have any? I think that was pretty straightforward, just business as usual. No items arising, so that takes us all the way to the in-camera portion of our meeting. And I'd like to see a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A of the Community Charter. Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Is there?
Ghost reporter. Do we need to have invited directors?
It's not that interesting.
So, welcome back to the very, very tail end of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of July the 20th, 2023. Do I see a motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.